topics that are facing the citizens and our listeners here in Chattanooga, Hamilton County, Tennessee, and North Georgia. And so today we've got a pretty interesting topic, Trevor. Can you tell us what we're doing?
We do. There's been a lot in the news lately about the removal of some of these Confederate monuments. And there, at least from what I've seen, there's not been a lot of discussion regarding the law on this issue in Tennessee. And so we thought today we would discuss that. And the specific provision we will be discussing is the law the legislature has named the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act of 2016. And as we'll discuss, I think later, this provides a procedure for folks to use if they want to remove a historic monument.
Well, for our old listeners and for our new listeners, you should know Legal Bytes, the law firm of McCune Williams, Atchley, Stanley, me and Trevor, and our oft-time host, Jim McCune, are never afraid to wade into the controversial topics involving the legal issues that we all face. And this one is certainly one of them.
Very much so. And there's very strong opinions on both sides of the matter. Folks who feel very strongly that these monuments should not be removed. And then folks also who feel that they represent very hurtful or harmful relics of the past and that they should not be on public property.
Well, I've noticed, Trevor, just in terms of discussing this issue, that we've got a series of these sort of confrontations that are taking place not only in the state of Tennessee, but all over the South. I haven't noticed them in any other regions of the country. So we've had those things that have taken place, certainly some in Nashville, also in Memphis. I believe there has been a use of the Tennessee Preservation Act in regards to Generals Nathan Bedford Forrest. I believe there was in a certain part of Memphis where one of those statues was taken down. Is that what your research shows?
I didn't find that specific issue.
Well, I'm sorry I put you on the spot.
Yeah,
Let me just tell you that's true.
Well, good. I was focusing more on what I've seen lately here, opinions expressed in the Chattanooga area regarding specifically Stewart monument located on the courthouse lawn.
And that is our controversy. So the NAACP has, and a number of other groups probably are joining in, trying to bring attention to what they believe is a controversy over the A.P. Stewart statue, which sits on the south side. He is facing south, which is one of the reasons it was placed in that position. On the south side of the lawn, that portion of the lawn not used anymore as an entrance. I doubt there are many people in the city of Chattanooga other than lawyers who actually knew that there was a statue there, and then who the statue is probably a mystery to most people.
Why don't you, Clay, why don't you tell us a little bit about who A.P. Stewart was?
Well, A.P. Stewart was a lieutenant general from Rogersville, Tennessee. So those of you who don't know Tennessee geography, Rogersville, Tennessee is in the northeast section of Tennessee, up near where, which would have been at the time, we had a vice president, President Johnson, later became the 17th president after the untimely death of President Lincoln, became the interim president or took his term and was ultimately one of the only presidents to be fully impeached. So he was from Greenville, Tennessee. A.P. Stewart's from Rogersville, which is neighboring. So it's sort of interesting those two people played such an important role in the events that occurred in the War of Secession. So
what's his relationship to Chattanooga then?
I got kind of off on a little bit of a tangent there, didn't I? So rather than having that big lead in, A.P. Stewart simply was a lieutenant general in the Army of the Confederate States of America. He moved back to Chattanooga. He became a citizen of some import. He assisted in the reconciliation between the two warring groups, the Army of the United States and the Confederate States of America, later who became American citizens again after taking the oath. So at the time when this reconciliation was occurring, we're talking about American citizens getting together, trying to reconcile after a terrible war that we had. Mr. Stewart became the first commissioner for the Chattanooga National Military Park, which people may not realize was actually the first military park designated by Congress. This was in 1890. A.P. Stewart later he was a professor of mathematics at Cumberland University just outside of Nashville. He was also at the University of Nashville as a professor and later became the chancellor for University of Mississippi. So he was certainly a very intelligent man, a man that was active in his community. His wife actually passed here when they resided here in Chattanooga for a number of years, became a very important person. The United Daughters of the Confederacy thought so, thought he was the appropriate person to make a bust of, and A.P. Stewart had a bust placed on the courthouse lawn that was made by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Interesting thing about A.P. Stewart, he did not own slaves, and he was not a secessionist. But nonetheless, when the war began, he thought it was important to leave his post in the armies of the United States. Like many Confederate generals, he left and he came and fought here in the South to protect his country. What he thought at that time, his allegiance was to, I think you and I spoke, Trevor, that was to the state and not to the United States, which is a sort of a different concept that we have now than what we had at the time.
Well, and that's, I think that their historians debate, I think, the true motives for why certain folks joined with the Confederacy, or why folks joined with the Union in the war between the states. But what I've read, though, here locally, and what I think has been published in the paper, certainly does indicate that what your recollection there of the history is correct, and that it's somewhat odd today. People don't necessarily think of their state, the geographic boundaries of their state, being an independent nation. But that's the way our federal Constitution in the United States of America was formed. We have a call coming in.
All right. Hang on just a second. Caller, this is Legal Bytes. Can we answer a question for you?
I love you guys. It's just, can we admit that this is not about removing statutes? These crybabies are upset that they lost an election. Ultimately, they're just a bunch of little Marxists that are going to keep crawling at it. And you know what? Put more Southern statutes up, because it was about states' rights. And, I'm a Northerner, but I'm proud to be in the South. I just wish the South would have won the war. The slavery was going away anyway. And look what the federal thugs have done to the states. They've impregnated the states with their northern poison, murdering over 100 million unborn babies. They don't deserve to be in charge. Thank God for the South. Thank God for the Confederacy. I am now proud to be a Southerner. They can all go to hell. I just wish the South would have won. And if at first you don't succeed, try again. Thanks.
Thank you, caller. We appreciate that call. I almost gave a rebel yell just for a second, but I'm trying to resist. So we want to thank you for that call. Any other callers would like to call and talk about this topic, it's 800-8949. We do appreciate your calls. This is a topic that neither Trevor and I were intending on having any sort of political discussion about. We certainly appreciate that caller, but we wanted to talk about the process. So I think we're ready to talk about that, aren't we, Trevor?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. So basically, we're talking about an act that was first developed in 2013 and was made law at that time by our Tennessee legislature. It is the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act, 41412 Tennessee Code annotated. It was updated in 2016. And essentially, it is an act that describes the process where a public entity, Trevor, that's essentially, it's got to be one of the governmental entities, it appears, has a way to either to protect and maintain those monuments. And these are monuments of historical import, and a way to remove them. Is that about right as a short version?
Yes, I think so. And I guess sort of the policy underlying this act is that the public entities have a duty to preserve these monuments on their property. And this law provides a mechanism for the removal of those memorials.
So we can't just decide in the middle of the night, we're going to come get the crane, put the chain around A.P. Stewart on the lawn, and lift him off.
Not if you're following the law. And this is what it provides, except as otherwise provided in this section, which would be the process for removing a monument. No memorial regarding a historic conflict, historic event, or historic figure that is or is located on public property may be removed, renamed, relocated, altered, redacted, or otherwise disturbed or altered. And so that's the general rule. The general rule is we can't remove monuments. And then the law provides a procedure, a mechanism where people can petition a commission to ask for permission, a waiver of that, to remove an item.
Well, this is sort of one of those things. It's a beautiful piece of legislation. I think one of the things that's a hallmark of something like that is that it allows for community participation to express themselves and to reflect the ways and means, the standards that the community has in the current atmosphere that we're in. So let's just say that after we look at this and the county hears from the people in this county, they decide that they would like to have this monument removed. They can do that. And the process then is to, I guess, go before the county commission. Is that what we understand?
I don't know that our local government has a set procedure, but yes, that I think would be if a citizen wanted to initiate this process, he or she would, I think, go before the county commission with some type of petition or request that the county commission take up what would actually be an application for a waiver through this commission established by the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act.
Well, so we're Legal Bytes. This is Clay Whitaker and Trevor Atchley. We're the law firm of McComb, Williams, Atchley, and Stanley. We would talk to you about any issues related to the law, but today we're talking about the topic of the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act, the controversial subject of the removal of monuments of historical import, particularly the latest one that's a subject of conversation in Hamilton County is the monument of A.P. Stewart, Lieutenant General for the Confederate States of America. The local chapter of the NAACP has taken up the issue and would like to consider whether or not it needs to be removed. Is that a short summary of where we are, Trevor?
I believe that's correct, yes.
If you'd like to call, it's 800-8949. We'd love to hear your calls on the topic. We're going to just continue the discussion related to the process for removal. So my understanding then is that when we're talking about removal, one of the things that has to happen is that we would have some input from the public entity here, probably Hamilton County, and then the county would order, I guess, the process would continue with having the county attorney file some petition with the Historical Monuments Commission.
Well, that's correct. The law provides as follows: the public entity exercising control over a memorial may petition the commission for waiver of what's subdivision B1, which is what I just read, which is the presumptive rule that monuments shall not be removed. And the petition must be in writing and shall state the basis upon which the waiver is sought. And it must be supported by at least one or more reports showing there is material or substantial need for a waiver based upon historical or other compelling public interest. And then the petition has to identify individuals or groups which may have an interest in receiving notice of the petition. And then before the petition is filed, there has to be a publication made to the public.
So this would allow for public input on the topic, basically to see if there's anyone that has strong feelings about whether or not this statue should remain currently where it sits on the south side of the courthouse lawn.
That's correct. And presumably individuals who are interested in the outcome would have the opportunity to address the commission during whatever proceeding occurred regarding whether or not the commission would grant a waiver so that the monument could be removed.
So something that came to me, we were kind of looking at this topic of one thing that was interesting, and I don't know the answer, but I understand in the act itself, the county, or in this particular instance, or the legal entity that has some responsibility for maintaining these monuments. You know, it struck me not too long ago, our city decided they were not going to, no longer at least, going to be responsible for charge of a trust for the Confederate cemetery that's set up on, I guess it's Maple Street or 5th Street, there by UTC. Is that your recollection? I was just wondering, how does this act play into something like that?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know whether or not the Confederate cemetery is on public property. We got another call.
All right. Welcome, caller. What can we do?
Hi, this is Tom with Account Services. We're calling in regards to your credit card accounts. There's no problems currently with your account.
Well,
it's urgent that you contact us concerning your eligibility for lowering your income.
Oh,
that's an unusual call.
That is an unusual call. This is one probably for the record books.
That must have been for the Credit Preservation Act. That was another topic. I'm not sure that we're really interested in that topic today. So
for all of our listeners who get these calls, that's a call you probably should just hang up on as we do.
Thank you, Tom, for that call. So we're here, Legal Bytes. This is Clay Whitaker and Trevor Atchley. Phone number is 800-8949, talking about the Tennessee Historical Preservation Act. And so we want to make sure that we have a full discussion. Any callers are welcome to call 800-8949. You can call back too, Tom, if you want to talk with us.
I get those phone calls at least once a week. And it is something that I guess the telemarketers have figured out a way to make it at least sound like somebody actually is calling your phone as opposed to a recording like that.
Well, I suppose so. And maybe that was a fishing expedition by Tom. But,
Um,
so anyway,
yeah.
we're here and we're talking just a bit about whether or not the city might have some responsibility for the maintenance of the Confederate cemetery. So that may be a topic we to visit sometime in the future in another legal context.
Well, and I think that issue will probably arise. My understanding is the city at some point of a designated trustee, suppose it must be some underlying trust, and the city's willing to be removed as trustee and has filed a petition for removal. And however that turns out, I suppose this act may come up in that litigation.
Well, it may, and it's interesting. The act itself says that it's the public entity that has the responsibility on whose land it is on. So the question then becomes, there has to be some connection between the public entity, the monument, and the control over that monument that the entity has. So it's not just the fact that, the trustee the city may have been named a trustee. We really don't know the legal entanglements that the city's in regards to that, but we do know that this act does play some role in it, and that may pop up later.
I agree with that. It could definitely play a role.
So just in terms of what should be expected next in regards to A.P. Stewart, we've told you a little bit about who A.P. Stewart was. I'm not sure exactly. We don't have anyone that can express what the NAACP says about A.P. Stewart. We do know that there have been a number of public relations postings that the NAACP has made about this particular monument. And we do believe that there is upcoming a prayer vigil. Is that correct?
That's according to a story that was on the Times Free Press website, that the local chapter of the NAACP is planning a march and prayer vigil on October the 1st to begin at, it says, begin at Miller Plaza and ending at the courthouse lawn. And I don't know that the people who are participating in these marches and are writing opinions necessarily have a problem with A.P. Stewart per se. I think that their issue is his likeness is he's in a Confederate military uniform, and their concern is that whether we should be celebrating a Confederate officer on courthouse grounds. I don't know if they're necessarily protesting A.P. Stewart per se individually, or if it's the concept, the idea of a Confederate military officer being remembered in that way on a public square, basically.
Well, it's a curious thing because the Historic Preservation Act, Historic Protection Act, and the Historical Preservation Commission themselves doesn't have an exclusion for Confederate monuments. You would agree with that?
No, it would apply to any monument. It's not limited to Confederate monuments, and it certainly includes Confederate monuments. It does not exclude them.
So in one sense, one of the things that I think is appropriate to talk about is that for the people of the city of Chattanooga at the time that the A.P. Stewart Monument was erected, which was in the early 1900s. I think it was 1903 or 1907, something like that. It was pretty early on at the turn of the century. And the meaning had to do with the reconciliation of the two armies, the army units that were in place here in the Chattanooga area, including Confederate Army soldiers as well as the United States Army soldiers. And so his position as a commissioner was one of the things that the ladies, and of course I think there were other philanthropic activities that he and his family were involved in, but the ladies of the United Daughters of the Confederacy decided it was an appropriate a thing for them to recognize him and have this bust. Now, that may not have the same meaning today. I rather doubt there are a number of people in Chattanooga who know who A.P. Stewart is.
I think, but to your point, though, I think that I think historians debate that question. Yes, people today are saying this bust of A.P. Stewart was placed on the courthouse lawn because of his role in formulating this national park here. But in general, though, the Daughters of the Confederacy had placed monuments in lots of different places, not necessarily this one in Chattanooga, where the perhaps underlying context was, pro-segregation, pro-Jim Crow laws. And so I think that is the basis of objections to Confederate monuments in general, which are not on military parks, but are in public squares as opposed to a military park.
Well, and so that may be the thing that the point of the whole endeavor that the Historical Tennessee Heritage Protection Act of 2016 really endeavors is to allow public discourse on the meaning of symbols. And, you know, one of the things I think is important is there is no restriction on the nature of the historical monument. Once the monument is erected, you can't just get rid of it. You have to have a process or a rule of law that applies that allows that to occur. So whether there are people who are protesting, you know, a couple of years ago we had the folks that were involved in a protest on the courthouse lawn. That lasted for a number of months, and that was allowed to occur. If something like that again were happen and there was damage done to the monument, it would be the county's responsibility, and they could be forced, I would say, under this act to repair and replace that monument, maintain it. So the fact that you did something to it wouldn't get rid of it.
Well, that's correct. And so what I was talking about earlier about the United Arms of the Confederacy and the installation of all these monuments, my understanding is that most of the monuments that the Daughters of the Confederacy installed were not of a high quality caliber design. They weren't actually made of bronze. There was an article in the Times Free Press or some publication I read about how some northern sculptor made them, and they were essentially put together very inexpensively. The bust of A.P. Stewart is not of that character. It's bronze. There was a local artist who designed it, and
I believe it was cast at Tiffany's in
correct,
New York, which is sort of ironic, you know, that a bust of a Confederate general was made in a northern state, but nonetheless.
But so some of the criticisms of Confederate monuments and public squares doesn't really bear true on this bust of A.P. Stewart. But I think in a more general sense, what these protesters were saying is, we don't think it's right for a Confederate general to be memorialized on a public square.
Well, and Trevor, you know, we're going to come back and discuss a little bit more of the basis for these sort of things in the second half of our hour. And if you'd like to call in, this is Legal Bytes. I'm Clay Whitaker. I'm here with Trevor Atchley. We're both attorneys. We represent people in a number of different kinds of cases. The law firm we work at is McComb, Williams, Atchley, and Stanley. The phone number here is 800-8949. Our office number is 756-6400. We'd love to talk with you about this topic. It is timely. It is the Tennessee historical issue that's come before us, the memorialization of A.P. Stewart on the courthouse lawn, the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act of 2016. Call us. Thank you.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news now.
At 6:30 in the morning, a pickup truck driver swerved off of Rossville Boulevard and punched a hole in the front window of the Harley Sports Bar. The driver was not hurt. He was cited for failure to maintain lane, yield the right-of-way, and no proof of insurance. EPB had to fix a power pole outside as well. The business suffering major damage. 53-year-old Tyrone Hauser has been arrested and charged with furnishing alcoholic beverages to an underage adult. The police say Hauser's son threw a party for his girlfriend, where at least a dozen young people were cited to court for underage drinking. The party took place in an abandoned field that was apparently owned by Mr. Hauser. The police responded to the location because of a noise complaint and spent quite a bit of time tracking down all of the young people there. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7 now.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7's fast forecast now. 85 degrees in Chattanooga, getting up to 88 for the high today and 67 for the low. Friday, 88 again for the high and 67. Partly cloudy for our Friday moving into the weekend. We have 87 the high and 66 the low for our Saturday. Nooga Radio is the home of Sean Hannity every weekday from 3 to 6. The David Tulis Show weekdays 9 to 11. That's your fast forecast. Now.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
You've been in a wreck.
756-6400.
You've been wrongfully fired.
756-6400.
A turkey is suing you out of the blue.
756-6400.
Confused about a business startup?
756-6400.
That's the number for you. 756-6400. Right here, right now, Chattanooga. Call now. Top flight legal help awaits. Get biz advice now. Representation to fight for your right. What are you waiting for? That's 756-6400. Don't sit on your rights. You've got remedies. Turn your tragedy into cash. You've got the solution from estate planning all the way to probate. Act now. Top attorneys in Chattanooga are waiting to help you get relief. Act now. No out of pocket. You don't pay a dime until we win. So win with us.
756-6400.
Call now. Top flight legal help awaits. What are you waiting for? That's 756-6400. Turn your tragedy into cash. Act now. No out of pocket. You don't pay a dime until we win. So win with us.
756-6400.
756-6400.
Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree? Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM and 95.3 HD4. News Talk Nooga Radio.
This is Legal Bytes. Welcome back. This is Clay Whitaker and Trevor Atchley.
We're on, I think.
And we're here talking about the issues related to historical monuments. The Tennessee legislature has acted. We talked in the first half about the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act of 2000 and now 2016. It was revised in that time. And we're talking about the local issue that's before us, and that relates to the A.P. Stewart monument that sits on the courthouse lawn on the south side. A.P. Stewart being a Confederate general, lieutenant general for the Confederate States of America, resident of born in Rogersville, Tennessee, resident of Chattanooga for a number of years, and other places in the South and other things that we've mentioned in the first part of the show that we're doing. So, Trevor, we were talking about the Heritage Protection Act, and we wanted to get in a little bit further depth about the way that it actually functions. So, basically, it's an administrative process that has to be initiated by petitions filed before the Historic Protection Commission.
That's correct. And at least the way the statute is written, the only entity allowed to initiate an action is a public entity exercising control of a memorial.
So in this instance, I think that the groups that are involved with a complaint or have a controversy in regards to A.P. Stewart, I believe the NAACP has spoken about this particular monument, and they would not be able, as a private group, to initiate the action by themselves. Is that right?
Well, that's under strict reading of this statute. Yes, that's correct. According to this, the only entity able to initiate the action is the public entity.
And consequently, under the act, the entity that we're talking about is Hamilton County, because it sits on the county courthouse lawn. They're also, incidentally, responsible for maintaining and keeping this particular monument.
In this instance, yes, that's correct. And so I think what ultimately would need to occur is folks who are advocating for the removal of the statute or any modification to it would need to lobby the county commission and ask them to initiate this petition.
Trevor, why don't you tell everybody who we are and what number to call in?
This is I'm Trevor Atchley. I'm here with Clay Whitaker. We're attorneys with McCoon, Williams, Atchley, and Stanley. We're here on Nooga Radio for our weekly show, Legal Bytes. You give us a call at 800-8949.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about this process. So let's say in this particular instance, after the public discourse was had, the county commission acts and they decide that they want to have this petition filed. Let's say the county attorney files a petition asking for the removal of the A.P. Stewart statue or the bust that's on the courthouse lawn, and it's presented to the commission. Basically, we've got an administrative hearing that has at least the right to due process. So the county, at least at that point in time, would be asking for a waiver. And so what is a waiver?
So the waiver is a waiver to the general rule, which the general rule is that the memorial cannot be removed. And so they're asking for a waiver of that general rule. In other words, permission to remove the monument.
So once the monument's been put in place, you can't just take it down. You got to keep it.
Correct. A monument on public, obviously a private property owner has the right to do whatever he wants to do,
right.
But and this is talking about a public monument. Yes. A memorial on public property.
Okay. So for instance, in here in Hamilton County, we've got a number of different kinds of monuments. Some I think are named, some may not be. The ones, let's say, that are on public lands, you got two different kinds of lands. You got city and county lands, and then you've got federal lands. So here, we're blessed with this national military park that memorializes the great battle that took place here in the Hamilton County, Chattanooga, Chickamauga National Battlefield, and that battle that proceeded south. So we're here in a place where there was a terrible battle, a number of them, and in that set of circumstances, you've got different kinds of monuments that are up on federal land. This doesn't deal with federal property, does it?
No, that's correct. But this is a state law dealing with monuments on state or municipal property.
So if there are places around the city, and I know there are a number of them, Orchard Knob, Bragg's Reservation, Turchin Reservation, Stringer's Ridge. Of course, we have the National Military Park that's around Lookout Mountain and then further south into Chickamauga. Those kinds of monuments are going to remain here, whether they are memorializing Confederates or whether they're memorializing the United States Army. It matters not. Those are under the protection of the National Military Park.
I believe that's correct. Yes.
So what we're talking about really, if there's something else, it has to be on the entities at least, or those under the jurisdiction and control of one of the local entities, either a local city or a county, in this case, A.P. Stewart. Once that petition's filed asking for the waiver, you get a hearing date. I guess you're going to have a discovery period or period of time to gather information.
The way I would interpret this statute is it's designed to give every interested party the opportunity to be heard, okay, before the commission. So even before the petition is filed, the petitioning entity is required to publish a notification in the newspaper. It has to be one here, in this case in Hamilton County where the memorial is, and then also one in Davidson County, which I guess is in the Nashville, Tennessee area. And once the petition is filed, an initial hearing is set before the commission, and it's scheduled no sooner than 60 calendar days after the petition is filed. And the purpose of this initial hearing is for the commission to determine what other interested parties or groups should be given written notice by the public entity of this petition. And the public entity also can be directed to do more public publications in order to give notice to the folks who might be interested in the outcome of this hearing. So that's the initial hearing. And then once the initial hearing has been held, you would move forward to a final hearing where I guess you would actually get to the merits of the matter.
So once you got to the merits of the matter, you're going to have some abbreviated evidence rules that allow for the submission of particular, whether it's documentary, historical, I guess in this case, there may be quite a bit of historical evidence. You may actually have experts who are in the field of history that might come in and testify, give evidence on behalf of whatever particular party might be interested in the outcome.
Yes, experts in the field of history, otherwise known as historians. They would have the opportunity.
Well, I guess that's true.
Have the opportunity to come. And this is what it says. An interested entity, group, or individual shall be afforded an opportunity to offer public comments regarding a petition for waiver at any commission hearing on the petition. And it says they can file a memorandum, report, study, letter, or other document relating to the petition for consideration by the commission prior to the final hearing. Okay, so all these groups have the opportunity to address the commission and essentially have input on a waiver, and that is permission to remove a monument.
It sounds like, Trevor, we could actually conflate this into something rather large, sort of like a monkey trial, where we got all the experts to come in. We could all pitch in and have our discourse and diatribe about whether or not we should take this monument down.
That's correct. I will tell you the law creates a strong presumption in favor of not granting a waiver. And I say that because what the statute provides is that in order for the waiver to be granted, the public entity seeking the waiver shall demonstrate mandatory by clear and convincing evidence, which is the highest civil standard, that a material or substantial need for a waiver based on a historical or other compelling public interest exists.
So in this particular case, whatever public interest there may be, and if I understand the argument correctly, it would be because of the allegiances that A.P. Stewart had at some point in his life, though he'd lived the remainder of his life as an American citizen and had devoted the portion of his life prior to his joining the Confederate States of America as an American United States Army major, I think is what he was. We would look at whether or not that section of his life actually had some determinative factor and the public interest required its removal.
Well, I think the inquiry could be broader than that. I think the inquiry could be whether having a bust of A.P. Stewart in his Confederate military uniform creates some type of oppressive environment for people visiting the public courthouse. I think that would be what proponents of the waiver would assert is the underlying issue.
And if I understand correctly, on the bust itself, it actually has the birth date and the date of repose for A.P. Stewart, as well as letters CSA on it, standing for Confederate States of America.
I believe that's correct. And I think on the bust, too, in his Confederate uniform, of course, he has the traditional belt buckle with the insignia CSA indicating that he was an officer in the Confederate Army.
All right. And so in terms of that process, once you've gone through the presentation of evidence, you've had the initial public discourse, the petition that's been filed, you have that, the commissioners, and I don't know how many commissioners there are. Usually on these kinds of boards, there are more than 2 or 3. So,
well, in order for the commission to grant the waiver, it requires a 2/3 vote.
All right. So at least there are 3.
Correct.
And so
there's at least 3.
I can do that math. And I'm not a historian.
That's right. or a mathematician,
or
I
a
suppose.
mathematician, or a radio personality. So
I couldn't tell that wasn't your day job.
Well, sometimes
you're doing such a fine job here.
Pull it off. So here we are, Legal Bytes. This is Clay Whitaker, Trevor Atchley. 800-8949 is the number if you'd like to give us a call. We're talking about a very interesting topic. Topic is the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act. Those monuments that decorate all of our area. Some of those might be subject to this act and may be subject to either their continued presence in our community, or they may be removed based upon Tennessee law. We're talking about that. If you want to call us, join in the conversation. We'd love to have your call, 800-8949. Trevor, we talked a little bit about what happens once that order comes down. Is that the end of the discussion before the commission?
No, the commission, of course, will make a determination whether to grant or to deny the waiver. However, there is a provision in this law for judicial review of the commission's ruling. And the statute provides that the public entity seeking a waiver, or any interested entity, group, or individual who testified or submitted evidence at the final hearing, who is aggrieved by the final determination of the commission, may file a petition for review in the Chancery Court of Davidson County, or alternatively in the county where the memorial lies, or it says it's located. And the petition for review shall be filed within 60 days after notice of the commissioner's determination is posted on the website of the commission. And the court shall conduct what is called a de novo review, which means with no presumption of correctness. And the court is entitled to hear new evidence and also to review the record of the commission.
So basically, somebody's going to get aggrieved, and it might be the people who filed the petition, it might be the county, and it may be those who are in favor of it. There may be those people who are in favor of the monument. But even if you are aggrieved, you have a redress, and that is you have an appeal, and that appeal allows you essentially a new hearing.
Correct.
And you can hear from historians and other people about these particular issues once again and see if they can change the minds of the new trier fact.
Which in this case would be the chancellor.
So the chancellor of Davidson County.
Or the chancellor of the Chancery Court in the county where the memorial lies.
Okay. So in that case, if we want to be one of our chancellors, so those of you who do not know, it would be in the same courthouse where we have chancellors that hear our issues. We have 2 of those, and we hear our issues in the Court of Equity here in Hamilton County, and one of them might be called upon to rule on this particular matter.
Yes, that's certainly possible.
Okay. And so we haven't heard about any additional monuments. I don't know if there are any that are causing any consternation with any of our citizens, but it's not limited strictly to monuments that relate to the Confederate States of America. It could be any historical monument, and that might be, there are a number of things that might cause people to have some grievance, and that might be related to any past wars or other issues of any historical import. As long as a monument's been put up, that's something that might cause you a problem.
That's correct. Well, what this does is it creates essentially a presumption that the monument should stay, and then the person or entity trying to have it removed bears the burden of proof. In this case, with a very high standard, clear and convincing evidence.
So really what's got to happen here is if this is something that's important to people, if they want to keep this monument, you're going to be asked to participate. If you want the monument taken down, you're going to be asked to participate. And depending upon what the public's sort of overall position is with regards to whether or not a monument to a person like A.P. Stewart that's the way it's going to be presented in terms of a position in our petition, and the county should act on whatever the will of the people is.
That's correct.
And that's the nature of local government.
Well, and I'm glad the state has this law because it does provide us a procedure, a method for resolving the conflict, or at least an attempt to resolve the conflict. I mean, I don't know that either side, depending on who prevails, would be totally satisfied with the ruling, but it would give both sides the opportunity to be heard and to present their positions to this commission. And if they're not satisfied with the commission, to present their position to a chancellor.
Well, certainly we give the opportunity for at least the citizens of the city and the county here to get to know each other a little bit better, what are important items to the individual persons in the city and to the groups that they represent, as well as the overall historical import in terms of education. Now that education has become such a hot topic here in Chattanooga, it's important that we continue that and realize how important our area is for the overall national history related particularly to the war between the states.
Well, and that's an interesting side note. I think, there's been a lot of discussion lately about a museum for the award given Medal of Honor recipients. And I think some of the first Medal of Honor recipients were medals of honor were awarded in the battles of Chattanooga and Chickamauga.
I believe that's correct. And I believe one of them, if I remember correct, there was an article in sort of the sound bites that occur with the National Military Park that speaks about the number of National Medal of Honor awardees that are recipients here that were from this area. So actually, the United States Army. It would have been for the Confederate States, right? But the United States Army.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's very important. It's important history for us in terms of, since we're all American citizens now, that this division has certainly occurred here, and it certainly was a battle that's an appropriate battle to study here, and not to oversimplify. One of the things I think I've learned in looking at this issue is oversimplification is really not a good way to approach any of these topics. You need to take a look at all the issues. I think that's the way most lawyers approach things.
Oh, it is. And, to the extent we're able, it'd be nice if in our public discourse we can avoid what I guess referred to as ad hominem attacks, where we're attacking a person stating a position as opposed to debating the merits of a position. Certainly we've been in Charlottesville and what occurred there is where a person was murdered. And we certainly don't want to ever something like that to happen here. And, I think citizens who want to state an objection are entitled to march and are entitled to protest, and the public space is for that. And as long as they're, have a proper permit and are not a hazard in some way, I think they have the right to express their opinion in that form of free speech.
We're certainly all in favor of the exercise of constitutional rights and for the enforcement of civil rights laws that accompany those rights, including the rights that are bound in the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and which we always try to make sure that our citizens are aware of. And so we will not tolerate violence. That's not the way to handle any of these things. The rule of law is important. Isn't that right, Trevor?
That's absolutely correct. That's why we're talking about this Tennessee Heritage Protection Act, because this is the law and provides the mechanism, the procedure for addressing what the concerns are regarding a particular memorial.
Well, and so in terms of the other things that may come about as a result of this, you do have, and I think in one thing factor for us to consider is that we do have a number of memorials that are not specifically tied to the federal military park. So we were talking earlier about the Confederate Cemetery that's on 5th Street next to UTC. There's also one, and that's a curious one because it's also next to two other cemeteries. One is a Jewish cemetery, and I'm not sure the name of it. And then the second one is a city cemetery. It's one of the oldest cemeteries in the city. So for those people interested in history, it certainly is an important public space. And I'm not sure, I believe that that's private land, at least at some point. I'm not sure how it's actually divided up. There's also another one that I'm aware of that's out on Lee Highway, I think we talked about. That is a separate cemetery with the same sort of very large edifice that's there, which is a limestone block edifice, some sort of pillars that mark the area. And so these things were erected at some point in time, and when we were kind of studying this topic, it became something very interesting to me was that the United Daughters of the Confederacy, when they were first formed, were trying to mark graves. And so they were trying to locate the remains of relatives who were gone, and that was very important to them. And you can see certainly how that's important to people at the time. It may not be as important now that we're so far past the actual conflict, and we didn't have any contact with our relatives that were involved in these conflicts.
Well, and that's, that goes, I think, to a larger debate about preserving space for the dead and celebrating, well, and giving a proper burial, I guess, is the issue there. And, I think, for example, a lot of the remains interred at the Civil War, at the Confederate Cemetery downtown, were folks who were not killed on the battlefield, but were mortally wounded and then died at the hospital. And their remains were put there and buried. And, in modern culture, I guess the probably quintessential example of King Priam going to beg Achilles for his son's body. We've always recognized the importance of burying the dead and giving them peace.
Well, Trevor, you've shown how educated you are. You mentioned the Trojan War.
That's correct. Homer's poem, the Iliad, where this is recounted, and but that seems, I think, to be the first, at least, recorded act of demonstrating the importance of a proper burial.
Well, thank you for bringing that class to our our radio show. I guess somewhat television show. I'm looking at myself here on the screen, so it's kind of weird.
We're broadcasting in some form or fashion.
That's right. Well, that's true. So yeah, these things are important, and it is interesting. The whole debate relates to someone who's passed, can't defend himself, can't defend the whole series of ideas that were present at the time that his decisions were made, and the things that he did in his life. And so it's just curious that we've taken this position now. That I guess it's fortuitous that there's some wisdom in Nashville, and so the legislature laid that wisdom on us when they had the Heritage Protection Act, so that you can't take the short view, you got to take the long view and see kind of where we are and what you want to do with the monuments that decorate your home.
Yeah, the public spaces around your city and the procedure for removing those, and the wisdom, I think, is in allowing all sides the opportunity to express their opinion.
Once again, the rule of law is the best way. And so we're here. This is Legal Bytes. I'm Clay Whitaker. This is Trevor Atchley. Also, my co-host is 800-8949. We're from the law firm of McCoon, Williams, Atchley, and Stanley, 756-6400. We'd be pleased to talk with you about any legal matters, those that come about in your daily life. Love to try to help you with those. We're here in a weekly show, Legal Bytes. We try to take up those topics which are current, which affect your lives here in the Hamilton County, Chattanooga area, and those in North Georgia. If you have any time that you'd like to be a caller, please give us a call at that number, 800-8949. We'd be pleased to take your call. Today we've spoken quite a bit about the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act, the A.P. Stewart Monument outside of our courthouse. It's a current topic. It's one you're going to hear about a number of times in the future, I think. And we've tried to give you the basic lowdown about what the law is and how it needs to be approached.
That's right, Clay. And I guess we'll see our listeners next week.
Okay. Thanks again, Trevor. Thanks, listeners. Thanks, Tom.